So we'll start this public caucus. Tonight we have Dave Trevisani from NDC in to give us a parking update and also to touch on the extension of the concession agreement that's in 6th order on our agenda. So with that, we'll give Dave the floor and to give us our update.
Great, thank you very much. As Councilperson Donahue said, we'll give our normal update, operations update, our normal financial update, performance of the system, and then get into some of the details about the legislation that was introduced just recently related to the concession agreement between CDPS and the city and the parking authority. Let me start right off with an operations update, ABM staffing update. We've had a fair amount of turnover the past 6 to 8 months. I think I'm happy to say that we are now fully staffed. Suzanne Kester, who had been the off-street manager, has been promoted to the operations manager for ABM for this area. So congratulations to Suzanne. We're looking forward to working with her. She's very experienced. She's been with ABM in this system for a long time. So she's moved up to be the head of that department. Her replacement has been hired but has not yet started yet. So we'll have a new off-street operations manager. So it's really exciting. It's important to be fully staffed so that we can make sure that we're providing the right level of customer service to the public. Capital repair needs, I like to highlight these because they're all that more important now. We always track these, but I think it's important to track them more closely now since, due to the pandemic and our tight cash flow, we have not been able to set aside dollars for capital repairs, and in fact, we've used our reserve to pay for debt service. So it behooves us to stay very close to what the needs of the system are, try to identify alternative sources. The key things on the docket right now are there's a roof over one of the stairways in the Linden garage that needs to be patched. It's leaking and needs to be dealt with before this winter. That's in the works. One of the most serious time-sensitive issues is the Medallion garage sewer main upgrade. This is the main from the Medallion garage to the city main sewer. It's pretty much collapsed. It's been plugging, and we've gotten inspections, and it just needs to be redone. So that's about a $40,000 repair, and that's underway now as we speak. And that doesn't only serves the garage, but it serves the ABM office, and it serves one of our tenants, the Zulo Investments, who's in that building. So very important for us to get that done and get that done right. The Linden Street elevator, we have 2 elevators in the Linden Street garage. The Mulberry Street elevator has been down for probably close to 8 months now. Not critical in that we have another elevator in the garage, but something we want to address as soon as we're able. We want to have both elevators working. This wasn't part of the original repair. It's old. It just needs to be upgraded. It needs a full upgrade. I think we've been working with it, and there wasn't money in the budget when we did the full upgrade of the garage, and I think it's something now that we'll need to find some sources to deal with. And then the HVAC upgrades. We list this here because a lot of again, this wasn't part of the original plan, but some of the systems that serve the commercial tenants in the Linden Street garage, for example, are better than 25 years old. We want to make sure that we provide good services to the tenants. These systems really need to be upgraded. We probably spend more on repairs now than we should, just because the systems are getting old. And if we can find dollars to improve those, it's going to make them more energy efficient and provide better service to the tenants who are using those spaces. So, it behooves us to really to locate as much in the way of other sources that we could bring to the table to try to upgrade these systems. And thankfully, thanks to you and the administration, have allocated $450,000 of ARPA funds, which are federal funds. We're going through that application process now. So that's great news. That's going to go in a long way to help us with some of these repairs. We've also applied for a local share account grant, the Monroe County grant, since we're adjacent to Monroe County here, that made us eligible. We've applied for $139,000 for the HVAC upgrades. We thought that was a priority. We're looking at other sources for the elevator that are handicap accessible sources at the federal and state level. So we think that there's some good sources out there. And this approach to looking at bringing other sources to the table, goes to what I'll talk more about later when we talk about the concession agreement and our conversations with our bondholders and the administration. Any questions so far, folks?
So does Medallion still have one vacancy in terms of the tenants?
It does. The old, there was a bar there, I'm not going to remember.
Coliseum, I believe,
Coliseum,
right?
that's correct. Now, we did, as part of our upgrade of all the garages, clean that space out. So it was, I can't tell you, mold, we cleaned it out, we did it right, and it is just 2x4 walls with a concrete floor, and we left the bathrooms intact. So, we would love to find a tenant for that. The upgrade to get it ready is not going to be inexpensive, but again, we're always looking for ways to try to bring dollars to the table to get a tenant in there. Haven't had much interest really as of late. All of our other spaces are occupied. That's the only vacancy we have. So that's a credit to downtown that we're actually fully leased other than that spot.
What's the square footage on that space?
Sorry?
What's the square footage on that space? How large is
Say
it?
around 4,000, 4,500.
Okay,
It's a pretty good size.
thanks.
Dave, is that local share account, is that gambling money or is that gas money?
That's gambling money.
Gambling money, okay.
Yeah, thank you. I wouldn't have the answer. Thank you. So let's get on to the financial performance. This is year-to-date performance through August. We didn't have the September numbers ready for this meeting, so this is through August. Revenue against budget, expenses against budget, and NOI, which is net operating income against budget, all positive. So $300,000 better than budget on revenue, $53,000 better than expenses against budget, and for a total of $352 better than budget against NOI better than budget. So that's really good news. Now, there's a caveat, and I'll get into the details here. This is the detail for the current period and the year-to-date. So the center column that you're looking at says year-to-date 8/31, actual budget variance, and on the far right is the budget for 2022 for the system. You can see that the monthly parking year-to-date is doing pretty well, about where we expect it to be on budget. The transient parking is off. More on that a little bit later. I mean, that's not to be, it's actually expected that the transient revenue's off. Less people are parking in their garages, and that's what the transient revenue number is. Validations, this number is off simply because, let's see, this number is actually better than budget year-to-date. This is where you have a merchant who is contributing towards the parking of their customers. So they have validation systems and they're allowed to participate, and they get a discount if they participate if the merchant pays for the parking of their customers. So you pull a ticket, you go into the garage, you go to shop, the merchant validates your ticket, and every month we send the merchant a bill. So that's really a good service that we offer at a discount to the merchants
Is that
in town.
mostly in the mall?
No, that is in downtown. The mall has a separate validation system altogether, totally different, similar in that it's a validation system, but total different setup.
Okay, thanks.
Our tenant income is down. I think that's just timing. Some of the folks are paying late. Recovery revenue is ticket revenue. That is, again, up against budget. And then the parking meter and the pay-by-sell is revenue from on-street, which again is up and up significantly. More and more people are using the app and paying by cell. I think that's a good thing. It's really convenient. We want to get more and more people to recognize that it really is easy to use, and they should try it. So it's actually been good.
I've also been trying to push that to people because most of the complaints I get about, the on-street parking is, someone will go up
Put in
and they'll be, they'll mix up one of the digits on their license plate, right? So usually when someone comes and says, I know I put my stuff in, I paid to park.
Yep.
My first question is, do you have the receipt?
That's
and when
right.
they say yes, the second one is, make sure that you're,
Right. That's exactly
but
right.
there is an appeals process for that, right? Where, they could appeal, they could appeal that ticket.
That is correct.
And then it's
If they
it's
show
usually
their-
granted, right? If it's
That is correct.
one
If you're
off.
one
like-
digit off or one
Yes.
letter off, they're going to get a refund.
Yes.
But if it's totally different, then
Yes.
obviously
So,
not.
but a lot of times it's, if someone has a license plate that's DAB,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
might
yeah.
be DBA.
Absolutely.
But,
Yep,
okay.
yep. There is a process for that, and it happens quite often. But you're
Yes.
right. Using the app is a good thing, and then we should push it.
Right, I'm glad you bring up the app, because I have to admit, I just started recently using the app, and I don't really know what took me so long, because I'm happy that I do.
Yeah.
It's a lot simpler, and you don't have to estimate how much time you might be there, and it just counts the time, and you could stop it when you're ready, and it already has your license plate
Yep.
information in there the first time you put it in, and it helps identify where you're parked, so you don't necessarily need
Yep.
to enter in a code for where your vehicle's parked.
It
but-
really is useful. If you're in a store shopping, or you're at the barber or the hairdresser or wherever, and you're running late, and you can't get up and run out to put more money in the meter, you sit there with your phone, you plug in, and you add $1 or 50 cents or whatever it is, and you buy more time. Don't have to go outside. It really is a good thing, and so I encourage folks to try to use it. It really works well.
And and on the app, it automatically stops too with the hour limit that's in that designated zone, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So the caveat I wanted to point out here is that if you look on the far right, the budget, when we approved this budget at the end of 2021, clearly we were in full-blown pandemic. We didn't really know how the system was going to perform. So we wanted to try to, these were estimates. We were trying to be conservative, and we passed a deficit budget, which suggests that you look at the net operating income of $1,251,000. The debt service is $1,544,000. So we didn't even project that we would generate enough income to make our loan payments out of the box at the end of 2021. Thankfully, we're doing better than that, and year-to-date, if you look at this actual number in the center, we are better than one-to-one, so we're better than break-even. We have $1,121,000 in net operating income, and our debt service year-to-date is a little over $1 million. So that's a good sign. Now, that being said, we're still not where we should be as compared to 2019. All of these line items are off as compared to 2019, still below, so we're still recovering. Folks are coming back, but they're coming back slowly. The one I wanted to point out, and it plays into the conversation later, is the transient. We're 48% off from 2019. The rest of these line items are 10 to 15% off from 2019. What that tells us is that people aren't parking in the garages. They're not parking in the garages to the level they were before the pandemic. But remember, we did a rate change at the end of 2019, effective 2020. We went from, I'm not going to remember now, I think it was maybe $3 to $4 an hour in the garages. So we think that's a combination. Less people are coming down, less people are using the garages, more people are parking on the street as if you look at these numbers. And so that tells us that, yeah, we're recovering from the pandemic, but slowly, but one of the big issues is folks aren't using the garages as much as we should, and they're taking up spaces on the street. So I think that's an important point to keep in mind. And one of the reasons we went and wanted to look at this restructure, because we think it's really important for the long-term benefit of downtown.
Now, I'm glad that you brought that up. Now, when you have a rate increase, do you know what percentage is going to go down, if it's going to go down? Like, do you have a calculation to project that?
We work with parking consultants, so we don't have an exact, a lot of it has to do with, the economy and, and that's actually plays into this next conversation. But it really has to do with the elasticity, it's called, of the marketplace, right? If it's $4 and it goes to $5, if you're in a tough economy, then that means a lot more to some people than it does to others, right? So there's only so much room. Elasticity means there's only so much room you can go without that parker saying, I'm not coming, the hell with it, essentially, sorry for that. But that's really what it comes down to is, and to really to segue into this next slide.
I have a quick question just
Yep.
before you go to the next slide. So you talked about, some people coming back, some not. But I have, just for my own curiosity, what percentage, or is it an impact, where people that remained at working at home and are never going back. My wife being one of them, so is that a big impact? Has that been?
We don't know yet. I think that we're seeing the monthly parkers come back. They're not coming back as to where they were at 2019. Will they come back to the state levels? I think next year is going to tell us a lot. I really do. I think that, but you're absolutely right. If a person's going to, they're working from home 3 days a week, or they're working from home all the time, they're clearly not going to buy a parking pass. But if they're working home from 3 days a week, are they going to buy a parking pass? Are they going to park on the street? Are they going to park in train? So we don't have that data yet, but next year will tell us a lot about how these numbers adjust. And we're in the process now of doing our budget for 2023, so we're going to need to make some assumptions in that regard, and then work with our bondholders as we work through this. So, but that's a very good question, and the answer is we'll see. We'll see.
So just to piggyback on that a little bit, do you break out your monthly parking numbers by who's coming in for work and who's residential? Because I could see the monthly parking go up because we have added, residential
Not
apartments
100%.
downtown
Not
in
100%.
those 3 years, but
We do have a residential parking rate, and we
Yes.
ask people questions about, are they a worker? So the answer, is it perfect? No, but the answer to the question is yes, but there's going to be some, give and take in that number. And we do really think, we've seen the growth in residential units downtown and residential parkers, and I think, as you know, last year, we put in place, at your request, a discount for residents who live downtown. So I think that that's actually working out well. Any questions on the budget or the numbers before I jump into the concession agreement modifications? Great. I know the legislation was, I think, introduced last week. But before we get into the summary, I wanted to just give you a little bit of the historical context and a little bit of the background. When we came in 2016, there really wasn't a whole lot of historical operational information. The rates were kind of all over the place. The operating costs, the numbers that we had were really, just not, there was not as good record keeping as we would have liked. So when we were going into a transaction, looking at historical data, it was very difficult to kind of project forward without good information looking back. So in putting together this with the team, and we had underwriters and we had parking consultants and helping us with this, we actually set out on a rate structure that met a debt schedule, right? So we knew we had an estimate as to what it cost to run the system, operating costs. We had a pretty decent understanding of what we thought the number of parkers were. But, I don't want to say we were shooting in the dark, but that rate structure was put together for 45 years to meet a number, to meet a debt service number, a debt payment number, and the projected increases that were built into that over the next 45 years were all tied into being able to support the debt numbers as they increased over time. So that's sort of the backdrop. When we started operating the system, it didn't take too long, but 3 years in, for us to realize that if we kept raising the rates based on the system, based on the approvals that were done in 2016, it would soon become very affordable. And what would be the consequence of that? Well, less people are going to park, as you just mentioned, right? At what point do people say, I can't afford that? The rate increases, in our estimation, would slowly and certainly over the next few years be at a point where they were unaffordable and less people would park and less revenue. So then you'd be raising rates, charging less people more money. Well, that's not a recipe for success. It's not a recipe for economic development growth in downtown. We're an economic development organization. We're not in the parking business. We're in the economic development business. We work with cities around the country to help them do these things in a way that helps their economy, not just generate the most revenue. So we kind of saw this coming, and then the pandemic hit. Clearly, we were impacted by the pandemic. Less revenue coming in, less parkers. We're starting to recover, but what that offered was an opportunity to revisit that rate structure and work with our bondholders to revisit the structure of the debt. So what we did is we engaged a parking consultant, Walker, we worked with this administration and we worked with our bondholders who made some recommendations. And those recommendations are very similar to what we saw. Remember, we inherited this. We took the rate structure that was there, and then we went forth and realized we needed to make some changes, pandemic aside. But the pandemic gave us the opportunity to educate our bondholders on what was happening in the system and what the net effect of those rate increases would be over time. And they were very good. Alliance Bernstein, very, very good, great organization, very professional. They really understood, and we acknowledged that it would be better for all of us if we looked at this over the long term. So what can we do? And the recommendations were to lower and this is what is happening in most major cities, where the parking in the garage is less than the on-street rate. So the goal was to lower the transient parking, which is the garage parking, to below the on-street rates. The goal there is to drive parkers into the garages and then free up those premium spaces on the street. So if I'm price sensitive, I'll go park in the garage for $1 an hour. If I have a time crunch or I want to park right in front of where I want to go, then I'll pay the premium. So the hope is that folks will come off the street, go in the garage, free up more space on the street, and there'll be more turnover on the street at the premium rate, and eventually our revenue would increase. Now we all recognize that in the short term that's going to be a revenue hit. So when we started talking about this, and the bondholders fully agreed, they said, look, we all recognize this is going to be an impact in the short run, but in the long run it's better for both the stability of the system, it's better for the city of Scranton, it's better for downtown economic development, so we're on board. But to make that work, we had to couple that with some other parts of this transaction, and that is extending the term of the concession agreement back to the original 45 years. Now, what that does for the bondholder is it gives them flexibility to work with the payments to maybe push them back. It gives them an extra 6 years to work with us in case we can't afford to make a payment in the next few years. So that was really the idea behind the need to extend the concession agreement term, combine that with the lowering of the rates, and then for us, and working with the administration, try to look for other sources that would pay for the capital needs of the system as we needed them. Now, the system's brand new, we've upgraded it, but as you can see, even with a new system, stuff's gonna happen. So working with the administration and identifying the ARPA money, applying for the LSA grant, looking for other sources at federal and state levels, gave the bondholders comfort that if these things all work together, the rate lowering is a good thing for the system long run. So I wanted to give you that context because I do think that, when we started this, we didn't really have a lot of information. Now I think we know very well what it costs to run the system. I think we understand who our parkers are. The goal is to get more parkers downtown, make it affordable, and not just raise the rates and charge the same people or less people more money because they have to come downtown. We want people to come because they want to come, not come because they can't afford to come. So,
Dave, once you establish, we move forward, we lower the rates in the parking garages, do you plan to establish a baseline as to where you are today and then really track it year by year so that you can evaluate where you're at?
Absolutely, and we'll, this is a little bit of a, we're coming out of the pandemic. We're doing the 2023 budget right now. So, we know how many people come down to park, we know how long they stay, so we're gonna have to use those numbers, project 2023, probably with some increases because we're still coming out of the pandemic, but then with the lower rate structure. And then, absolutely, we'll then track that to see how that's performing over time. We'll be looking at the monthly parkers and are people staying home? Are they working remotely? Is that affecting our numbers? And the good thing is we have a bondholder here that I think, and by all appearances, is ready and willing to work with us and think about this in the long-term realm, and not just raise rates so that we could generate more money today to get a payment made. That's not where they're at, and that's really.
Is it fair to say that the garages are absolutely underutilized at this stage?
Absolutely.
They are.
Absolutely. Connell is mostly full because it's right next to a residential building, but The rest of the garages are, overall, the system's at about 30 to 40%.
So which garage is doing the best? The
Connell.
Connell building?
Is
Okay.
Connell and occupancy in Connell's the best, yeah.
Okay.
So to summarize, the proposed amendments include a concession term extension, resetting to the original 45 years. That gives the bondholders flexibility in the early years of this rate change to work with us. Parking rate adjustment, so lowering the off-street rates, the transient rates, starting in 2023, with periodic increases starting in 2026. We also felt that coming out of a pandemic, we should fix the rates for a period of time, and this was, again, the recommendation of our consultant, and then fix the on-street rates as well, where no increases till 2026. We think this will put the system on a solid footing for the long run, and once folks recognize that it's not so bad to park in the garage, and I know a lot of people have an aversion to that, but for $1 an hour, maybe I'll give it a try. That's kind of what we're hoping for. And then it also talks about the terms of how we comply to access the $450,000 for capital. And that's important because as the revenue is going to be less in 2023, 2024, probably for a couple years, we're going to need some other money to fix the things that are going to, some of those things are going to go wrong. So we think this is going to go a long way. So now we don't have to budget as part of our operating budget, right? We don't have to take money out of the revenue we're getting to set aside for capital. So in the early years, this dollar amount was very, very important to the bondholders. So again, thank you. And then Juneteenth was added to the list of closure days where parking will be free. And I know the council approved that, and we're going to add that to the concession agreement. So those are the summaries for you and a little bit of the background as to how we came to this conclusion. And again, we're not here, we're a community and economic development organization. We're not here to raise rates to maximize revenue. In fact, the concession agreement that was worked out in 2016, if things go gangbusters and go great and Scranton population booms and the parking system is doing phenomenal and generating all kinds of cash, which we don't see, by the way, anytime soon, but if that happens, that extra money comes back to the city, directed by this body and the administration. We don't make any extra money. We don't earn any additional fees. This was structured as a not-profit run system that we're running on behalf of the city with a goal of economic development for downtown. So I think that's an important thing to point out, because sometimes that gets forgotten. If you look at the documents, it looks like a privatization, but it really is, we're a steward of this asset for you and the consumer for the long run. It's really how we look at it.
And really, the agreement has helped the city financially when, in their infinite wisdom over a decade ago, council, decided not to make parking debts on the parking debt or payments on the parking debt, and that's reverberated, throughout the city's finances
Without a
to
doubt.
this point that we're still dealing with today. And, even with
Right.
this, we're still
Right.
trying to, fix the sins
To
of the
get through
past,
it,
I guess I
right.
would say.
Right.
So with that, right, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, say we were to reject this agreement, what happens?
Good question. I think we've worked with the administration and the bondholders in good faith to try to put something together that works for the benefit of the system long-term. I think we go to doing the best we can to pay the bills, the best we can to make the payments to the bondholders that we're obligated to make under the agreements. And up until now, the bondholders recognize that we've been working with them, and so they have not really, we're not in default. We've been making our payments, we're doing our audits, we're remaining in compliance, we're in technical default of the documents because we don't meet our 1-4 coverage, for example, but every 6 months, they sign something that says, you're okay, you're not in default, we're not gonna do anything. It's kind of a non-technical term, but that's kind of what happens because they know that we're working through this. If this doesn't happen, it's hard to say. We'll probably they're not going to do that forever.
No, yeah.
Right? Then they have some decisions to make. Do they come in and take it over? Do they fire us and bring in their own people? You know, they got all kinds of options under those circumstances, which I don't think anybody, wants to do, but
But at the end of
that's-
the day, the city would still be on the hook for any debt payments for the city, or for the system.
No, the city's not on the hook for any of the debt payments. These debt payments are CDPS's debt payments. They're not on the city's books, and that's really a good thing, and that's kind of was one of the things that really was important when the city was going through its restructuring. So these are not city obligations. These are our obligations. But what would happen is you might have, bondholders coming in and making the decisions. And then are they going to do this, or are they just going to raise the rates and take
Yes.
whatever they can get so that they can pay themselves off, right? If you're.
Raise the rates, maybe not do the capital improvements that are necessary.
Yeah, they may, right. So you might have a whole different situation, which nobody might like. But it's hard to know what that'll turn out to be, but nobody's thinking like that, at least not on our end. This is the rate structure that's going to be attached to the agreement, and it references what we had just talked about. It's fixing the rates till 2026. It's going from $4 to $1 on the transient rates, and the on-street rates stay the same till 2026. So just like the previous schedule that was attached to the concession agreement, what this does is it adjusts it based on the lowering that we just talked about, and then has more modest increases than the previous schedule. So our hope and our goal, if I could go to the next slide, this is for illustrative purposes, right? When you're operating a system, you want to be able to pay your bills, you want to be able to pay your debt payments, and you want to be able to put some money aside to improve the property as things get older, right? That's the goal. And you want to be able to use the dollars that you're generating from revenue to set aside for those capital needs. So if you look at this is if we don't change anything on the debt structure. So this is just to say the blue line is revenue expected with the new rate structure. So that's where we expect it to go over time, right? The pink line, is that pink? Yellow, pink, whatever color that is, on the bottom is the debt payments. That's if nothing changes. Those are the debt payments under our current obligations with our bondholders, okay? The green line are projected capital improvements that are estimates for an ideal scenario to improve the garages over time if, as they age. So our goal is to work with our bondholders, identify other capital sources, whether it be federal, state, or other, so that the pink line and the green line together are below the blue line. That's the goal. We're not there if nothing changes, right? We recognize that. The bondholders recognize that. The administration recognizes that. Our capital reserve accounts are depleted, right? We're still coming out of a pandemic. Our goal is to grow the revenue with the lower rate structure, work with our bondholder, identify capital needs so that the green and the pink are below the blue over time. We'll have good years, we'll have bad years, but that's normal, and then you adjust as you move along. So I just wanted to show that for illustrative purposes. Our bondholders know this, they've seen this, they recognize they need to work with us, and this was really a collaborative effort to get them to recognize the importance of thinking about this long term.
I have a question for you on the transient rates. So I know you have the hourly changes here, but there's like a day or an overnight rate? Like how would that change, or is it still just the amount? Like, so if it's $1 an hour, then it's $12 for a
With this in
day?
$2 increments. So, and I don't have that slide with me, but yes, there will be. There'll be $1 an hour, then it'll go, I think there'll be like a 2-hour rate will be $2, and then it'll be incrementally higher and there's a $24, and I don't know what those are without looking, but the answer is yes, there will be, but it'll incrementally increase based on the $1 an hour.
Okay, I'd be interested in those rates as well when you do
Okay.
get that information.
Yep,
Thank
I
you.
will.
And in terms of the concession agreement, these are basically just caps on those rates, correct? It doesn't
Correct.
necessarily mean you have to go to this level. It
That is
just,
correct.
it just gives you the ability to go to this level.
Correct. Actually, the concession agreement requires us to come back to this body in the parking authority, whether we go up or down. If you recall, when we did a rate change at the end of 2019, which was going to start in 2020, not knowing there was going to be a pandemic, we came to this body and had the ability to raise rates to $100. That was the rate we were supposed to be at in 2020. Today, we were supposed to be at like 115. We're suggesting we stay at 92. So if we change the rates differently than this structure, up or down, we would need to come back to this body. We don't expect them to go up. We would come to you to say, hey, we don't need to raise them this high because we think we're going to be fine, and that's what we did a couple years ago, was we came here and said, allow us to change the rates, but lower than the agreement says. And of course, we'll continue to be here quarterly, so you can watch this progress as it plays out next year. So, any other questions, comments? I just have one more slide that I think I presented the last time, but wanted to just keep it on your radar. So thank you for your consideration for this legislation. I do think that this is good for downtown, it's good for the city, it's good for the parking system, and it really was a collaborative effort to try to get to this point. So appreciate your consideration of I think what this is economic development to me. We're calling this parking decriminalization. This is something that we've been working on for the past few years with the administration. And any parking system needs some enforcement mechanism to not encourage cheating, essentially. And immobilization, formerly called booting, is really the way most parking systems deal with that. If you get so many tickets, then we can boot your car, and nobody wants that to happen. So we do have that authority now. It was passed on to us as part of the concession agreement. We can go immobilize vehicles currently. We have not implemented a program because our goal had been to strengthen that program and make it really more fair, more useful. And the challenges have been access to information into the magistrate's database, so that when somebody gets a ticket and the magistrate works something out with them, there's no way for us to know whether or not that person still has outstanding tickets. So we couldn't immobilize that person because we would not know if they were still in violation. So this decriminalization, we're calling it, is a way to take it out of the magistrate's office, bring it sort of in-house with ABM. Decriminalizing it, what that means is getting a ticket is not a criminal offense, it would be a civil offense, and then there would be an adjudication process that would be run sort of by the parking authority and ABM, where if people wanted to challenge a ticket, they could, and there'd be a body that would look at that. I think the benefits to this really are just that, the ability to have a system, and this is worked in, we brought on a consultant, they worked on this, I think, in Reading, they worked on this in Easton, and it's shown there to actually, over time, reduce the number of tickets that you're issuing, and people are just, complying with the, paying for parking for what they use. And in addition, the barnacle system that we're proposing to use is just way more user-friendly than a boot. It's a system where, and if we go through with this, we actually have videos that have been used in other cities across the country to educate folks on how this is using. We're in conversations about an amnesty period where folks, if you have an outstanding ticket, you'll be given plenty of time to get current and pay. So we'll roll this out over time, but the goal here is to, prevent abusers, right? Folks get tickets, they know they cannot pay, and they let them go on, and then we only collect a small fraction of what actually is outstanding. So we think this will, one, encourage more participation. Folks will pay for what they use. This will act as a deterrent to that. And the barnacle system is really much more user-friendly than a boot, say. So we're hopeful that this, we get this to the point where it is in front of you formally and we can have more conversations about it.
I have a quick resident question that doesn't really pertain to this. So a resident asked me that this was prior probably to the contract or negotiated during the contract. I don't know, that's why I'm posing the question to you. There used to be free spots in front of banks or restaurants or 15 minutes or 10 minutes. They were all taken away, is that correct? Or
No, we went
do they
to-
remain?
What we did is we went to loading zones. We worked with Scranton Tomorrow, who worked with the merchants and created loading zones and blocks. So instead of having multiple random spots in front of specific businesses, we created central location loading zones to support the businesses in that block.
You mean just for deliveries? I'm talking about, say, a customer.
It would be the same thing. It would be somebody needed to park in a loading zone for 15 minutes. They wouldn't get ticketed for that period of time. The idea was to support the merchants in that block, whatever that merchant is. So that was the idea behind it.
So this piece here was brought up, I think, the last time you were in.
Yeah, I think so.
Since the last time you were in, I had time to take a look at it. The cities that were kind of touted were Bethlehem, Reading, Allentown, Easton. Did you see a similar outcomes in all of these cities?
We did. Now, our consultant that we worked with, I don't have that data here, but the answer is yes. So what they showed is that, initially there would be a lot of folks who were wanted to adjudicate a ticket, right? So that workload would be high, because one of the concerns that we all had was, how many of these are we going to see? Is this going to be a major effort to try to take the place of the magistrate to somebody's fighting a ticket? And what we found is that initially we'll get those, but over time, within a few months' time, the number of folks challenging tickets would go down, more people would be complying and paying, and the collections would be higher, because what we would be doing is working with a collection agent so that folks who got multiple tickets who didn't pay, we would be able to manage that directly ourselves or through ABM, and that would be a more efficient process than otherwise. So what they saw was a very small number of adjudicated tickets, more compliance, people just paying for what they use, and more revenue to the parking system from collections.
Okay, I don't want to take you off guard with this, but so we're looking to get a hearing officer, correct? That would hear these tickets or hear these cases?
Yes, I don't have the latest on that, but the conversations have been having a body that would adjudicate them, and that the parking authority might be that body. And you may have asked this question the last time. There's no plan to add cost. This would all be done, it would either come out of, any additional cost would come out of the fees or the revenue, or there may already be staff in place. I don't know the specifics of that, but there's not a plan to add cost to the city or the parking authority for managing this.
So would that be a city employee, or that would be an ABM employee that's working off of those
I
revenues?
think we'd have to yet get to that point, but it may be a parking authority employee or contractor, not exactly sure.
Gotcha. 'Cause,
Council person.
So why I bring this up is I have two articles here that were in front of me, and maybe you could speak to it again. Like I said, I didn't want to appear to be a setup question, but they're both about Easton. So the two things that you discussed is, the unpaid parking tickets. So it has Easton between December of 2013 and December of 2015. The growth of unpaid parking tickets went up $750,000.
Unpaid.
Unpaid. So they saw in Easton that there was a growth in unpaid tickets when you switch from criminal to civil. And then when it comes to the amnesty, the second article said that Of the 11,074 tickets that were unpaid, with that amnesty over that period of time, only 1,037 were paid. So it seemed like the people that had unpaid tickets ignored the amnesty, and also the growth in unpaid tickets grew over that time as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's inconsistent with what our consultant have said happened over time.
And that's why I asked, did you see the same
Yeah.
trend across those couple cities?
Yeah, and that's, again, that's inconsistent with what our consultant said, and I'll take this back to him for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, my concern is we're switching from criminal to civil, and this is the outcome we're seeing. I mean, that was the concern I think I raised last time as well.
So that, your source says the unpaid tickets actually went up.
Yeah, so the one was the morning caller from Easton. Said that Parking Scofflaws ignored the amnesty offers, so that's from 2016. So 3 years after this was implemented.
Right.
And then the other one was from Channel 69 out of Easton. So that's,
Okay.
they were reporting that the growth in unpaid tickets increased.
The growth of the unpaid tickets increased, which is interesting.
So from when it was presented to me,
Yeah.
looking at my research, that was what I discovered.
Okay, well, we'll get back to our consultant and look more deeply into that for sure, because that's
Yeah.
not the message that we were receiving, that over time, we would have more compliance, and I don't know if the unpaid tickets, but the collections went up. So does that mean more people are getting tickets and then not paying them? So that seems to be inconsistent, but I'll look into that, and I might ask you, councilperson, for that source so that I could present it to them directly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you tell us, you said that your contact, did they ever contact any of the magistrates or the court administration office when they're doing this study for you?
We were, you mean our consultant?
Or you,
Yeah,
whomever?
no, we were working with the administration. I think the law office here was we actually met with the magistrate locally here. We didn't talk to magistrates in other locations. No, we did not.
You met with the local magistrate?
Yes, we did.
Which one?
This was a while ago, so I'm not going to remember the
One
name.
downtown, Magistrate Farrell?
Yep, I think
You
so.
physically met with her?
Woman, we did, a couple occasions. Yep.
Okay, because when I spoke to her, she had no idea about this.
No, I was actually in a meeting with, if it's the same person we're talking about,
Okay.
I was actually in a meeting with the magistrate, a woman with ABM on a couple of
Could have been one of her
occasions.
staff members, perhaps?
No, I think it was, I was pretty sure we were talking to the magistrate. Yeah.
Now, you said you didn't have any idea when the magistrates adjudicated one of the parking tickets, right? Citations?
I'm sorry?
You didn't have any idea that was one of the complaints once the
Yeah,
magistrate got it?
it really, our challenge has been, from the beginning, was we have the ability to immobilize a vehicle.
Right.
But let's say we give a ticket to a person and they don't pay it, right?
Right.
We have to then send that ticket to the magistrate.
Right.
And then we then lose touch. If the magistrate collects some of that revenue, we just get like some money over time. So that parker that received the ticket and we sent that over to the magistrate for collection, there was no way for us to know if the magistrate and that parker ultimately paid that ticket or got, or
Well, don't you
received
show to the hearing?
relief,
Was it a
or,
representative of yours showed with a hearing?
no, we just send it over to the, because there's volumes of these, so.
Right, I've represented people against ABM.
Right.
And they've always presented with the representative from ABM to come to the hearing, so I'm confused as
For every hearing?
everyone
Yeah,
I've
and
been in.
maybe
I
I'm
don't
not
know if,
fam-
I can't
yeah,
speak to
I-
everyone that's ever
Yeah,
occurred. but-
I'm sorry that ABM's not here, because I'm not as
Right.
in tune to the process, but my understanding, and this is just coming from conversations with ABM and why we're pursuing this, was access to the information on what arrangement was made. So if that parker who got a ticket,
I-
then
Right.
then there was a hearing, and whatever came out of that hearing was entered into the database, and they made it, whatever, a lower payment or paid in full, or whatever it was. If that person got another ticket in the time frame, we wouldn't know that happened because of whether or not that person paid whatever was agreed to, You know what I mean? So then we would not be able to then boot that person because they might be in compliance with whatever
Well, they have
order.
to, they have to have some type of documentation. If they're sending the ticket over to the magistrate's office, they have to have some file on it.
Right, but after the fact, and again, I hope I'm not talking out of school, but this is my understanding, that once there's a hearing and once there's an arrangement made, there's no way for us to know without accessing a database that shows that that person actually followed through on making that payment. So if they get another ticket in that meantime.
No, I get what you're saying.
We can't boot them because we'd be maybe improperly mobilizing a vehicle. So we
Right,
just,
no, I get what you're saying.
so that's the idea behind trying to
There's
find a
gotta be some type
better
of-
way.
Yeah, there's got to be some type of disconnect there.
Yeah.
Because it's not making much sense.
So we're trying to find a better way. I mean, this is something that we have identified that was done in other communities that, because right now, you were at a bit of a disadvantage because we have not been able to implement this deterrent effectively. And we're open to ideas. I mean, we're open to other ideas. I mean, we do know that folks are abusing the system, and there isn't a way for us to actually implement a deterrent, right? I think we would all agree that we need some form of deterrent from somebody to just get tickets, not pay, and then over time, not have
So
any.
there's no cost if you boot the vehicle?
Yeah, there will be a cost. If we immobilize the vehicle, they would then, this is what's kind of cool about this barnacle system is it sticks to the windshield.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen this, but it's kind of cool. It sticks to the windshield, and then the person would have to pay their bill, and they pay their bill with a credit card, then they get a code, they put the code in, and it comes off their windshield. And then they take it to a drop box.
But there's
It's a lot more friendly than a boot.
Right, there's additional fees associated with, because they have to
They
put
would,
it on.
yeah, right.
steering,
There would be fee, they'd have to pay become current and then pay a fee for the booting thing.
And then,
Yeah.
I'm assuming a service charge with the credit card.
Yeah, and well, of course, yep,
Right.
yep. So I don't have those details, I'm sorry here, but yeah, that's the idea. So, and I raise this here because I know it's a big deal, and I know it's, nobody likes to get booted, right? Nobody likes to be immobilized, but I do want to make the point that it is important to have a deterrent like this with any system to avoid,
But you have the deterrent now, right?
but it's really not working well because of the situation I was trying to describe, and maybe I just,
No, I understood what you were saying,
okay.
but maybe it's ABM that's not keeping, I don't want to say that, but there's got to be some type of happy medium here with the record keeping.
Well,
Because that's not,
I'm all
merging
for,
together from
I'm
what
all
you're
for
saying.
having that dialogue, but I think that I know that we've been trying for a while and haven't really been able to get to that point, which is why we ended up with this idea. And again, you sound like you know a lot more about this than I. I'm open to ideas.
So from
But given-
what I'm hearing up
Yeah.
here, it seems like there needs to be a way to communicate with each other. If we're communicating with each other, then you have a record of who already has a
Yeah,
ticket,
and I
and then
think
you can
that's
pursue
what
from
I
there.
understand to be the issue, is trying to find out, being able to access that information so that we could then know who's
well,
compliant,
if
who's not.
ABM's a party to a hearing and the judge makes a determination on it, everyone gets a request.
Does it
as
happen
to
right
what-
there, or they?
Pardon?
Does it all happen
So
like right
let
there?
me just just a suggestion here. We don't have this legislation on our agenda
Yeah.
tonight, but let's try to schedule a meeting with, maybe if Tom and Attorney Gallagher want to go,
Mm-hmm.
with members of the administration, ABM, before we get this decriminalization legislation to
I-
work out those details.
Absolutely, great suggestion. We're open to trying to figure this out. Happy for, appreciate any input, honestly.
And ultimately, if the communication issue can be worked out with the magistrates, the communication back and forth, perhaps we won't even have to get down this road.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Again, ABM has the details, and I'm, maybe at a little disadvantage here, but more than happy to have a conversation with the parties that be to try to figure out how best to get through this. Appreciate the
And we'll work
dialogue.
it, and we'll work on scheduling that
Appreciate the dialogue.
conversation in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I do. I just had a couple of things to bring up quickly, not related to the decriminalization, but just related to some complaints that I've received regarding parking downtown. And so I just wanted to bring them to your attention and then see what we could do to work together to resolve them. So I've heard from people who live downtown as well as people who don't, but they're parking downtown. And one of the major issues, but not the only one, has been the handicap parking and the availability of it. Now, I know we've had conversations with ABM, some emails over the past couple of weeks regarding adding painting to the curbs, like there might have been in the past, to more easily identify handicap spots. But one of the other consistent issues that I've heard, and that I've even noticed myself, has been the signage for those handicap spots is not very clear or obvious for people. So there could certainly be people who are parking there knowing that it's a handicap spot and just taking the risk, but then there might be other people who
Right.
do not. And so we want to make that as clear as possible for them so that those spots are not taken up when people do need them. And there's been a complaint, especially about Penn Avenue, about the limited handicap parking spots on there. I think particularly the 200 block, that there used to be more, and then with the parking changes over the past few years, now that's cut down to one spot that I think is nearby Linden, and that's often taken up, and so it's really difficult for people to use it when needed. And people parking in the spots without handicap placards, there's been questions about, are those people being ticketed, those violators, how often they're being ticketed? Do we need some more like saturation patrols downtown, something that I'd like to coordinate with SPD on too, because I know this could also be happening on the weekends or in the evenings when ABM is not responsible for the
Yeah,
ticketing.
that's a good point. I mean, ABM enforces during the day, during the week, and so it's parking's free on the weekend. So if someone's parking in a handicap spot on the weekend, I think that would revert to the police.
Correct,
So,
but I just
yeah,
want to make sure we
that's
cover our
important to
bases
know.
all around and that
Yep,
people
yep.
are being ticketed if they are in violation of parking in a
Agreed.
handicap spot,
Yep.
which is a serious offense, much more so than just going over time in
Yep.
a metered spot. Because there are a lot of people who rely on those spots and they're not available, and so people living downtown who need them, that's really a problem for them. And there are some other parking violations too, in terms of people parking in front of fire hydrants, in front of driveways, and I was also told that along Penn Avenue, there used to be signs, some no parking signs in those areas or in driveways where there no longer are signs, and that's more visible through, I think, Google Earth as opposed to Google Maps. And so I wanted to connect more and figure out if we need more signage there, if that needs to come on our side, if that's something we need to work with DPW on getting, just to make that clearer for people parking downtown. So I believe that's the gist of
Great.
it, but
I'll get back to ABM on these. I've heard the issue of the signage on the handicap spaces before, so the painting them and the signs that are there look too much like the other signs, and you can't really distinguish. So I see that. So that's that, and I've heard before. I'll get with ABM. I want to understand from them, because I know that the city has responsibility over signing, so whether they can do something without this body's authority, I'll need to be reminded of that, and so I'll get up with them for sure, as well as identification of handicap spots. I don't know that we can decide that on our own. That may be, I think it's this body who decides that, but I'll get those details and we'll get back, and we'll report back.
okay, that'd be great. And then it does sound like DPW was waiting on a list from ABM for where those handicap parking spots are, and that DPW was agreeable to painting the curbs in those locations. So I'm not sure if they've received that list or not.
Okay. I'll make that note.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your time
Thank
tonight.
you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Thank you for coming in, Dave.
Great, thank
We
you. Good
appreciate it.
dialogue, thank you.
We're going to take 60 seconds before we start our regular council meeting.